To another edition of the Rock Power Report podcast. Chris, do you pre-shake all the beers in your fridge?
No.
This is a weekly phenomenon that only seems to happen when I'm here. Like, Doug, you've seen me drink, and I've been able to drink dozens of these things.
You're wasting Utica Club.
Never before have I worn every single beer that I pull out of a fridge until I do a podcast with Chris. I have a feeling that whenever he's down or he's cranky about something, he pre-shakes every beer in that fridge.
But you have drank a Parliament cigarette butt out of a beer can.
Yeah, thanks. That's your fault. Guys, I'm here. I'm Drew Gear, your host. I still have the mustache. And I feel like it's distinguished at this point. Although, Chris, I think the bit's over, isn't it? Like, when it comes to the mustache, I think it's time.
You look like the skinny version of Sheriff Buford T. Justice. That's who you look like. You're chasing the bandit.
Chasing the bandit.
And when you were dressed up, when we pulled in to do this and you were in your business attire and you got out looking like that, you look like a failed bodybuilder who just works in an office now wasting his days.
Guys, I'm Drew Gear. That's Chris Kruger. Doug Relosky in studio with us. And we're here just to talk about Bills headlines and kind of look at some overreactions by our Jonathan Sen, rocking the mustache. Yes, sir. Cheers. Sen, how you doing, brother?
Johnny.
Guys, first of all, I want to start off with this. I think Chris had food poisoning. Can you expand on that?
I just don't feel good.
I don't feel good. Is that why you shook all my beers?
No, it's just, I mean, I had a turkey club earlier, and I feel like it's just laying in my stomach.
You got the Bee Gees right now?
Little farts.
Okay.
But I don't know. I just feel like it's getting worse.
You want to take some Tums?
Tom? No.
No, you sure? Maybe just settle down that indigestion?
Yeah, what do I have in my... I have in my desk, I do have right here, Pepsid AC from that one time I went to the ER.
What did you go to the ER for?
Doug, you two have actually a shared story. You two have a shared story. Tell him how you went to the hospital and found out, oh no, you've just got a heartburn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Heartburn. I had wings at, what's that?
Duff, Sparbill.
OP Social.
Okay.
I had wings there, and I went to the hospital later that night. It was an event.
Did you go by ambulance?
Mm-mm. Ah, man. I drove like a real man.
There you go.
So Terry White in the comments, did the boys finally see a Sabres win? It's actually a nice intro to the show and segue into our talking points for the night. I took my kids to their first Sabres game over the weekend. It was a great time to do it. We got probably the best tickets that I've had recently. 9 rows off the ice, section 116. You're just above the glass on the end. They shoot twice at around the 45-yard line of a Sabres game. The team is bad. It's a weekend day game, and it's the St. Patty's Day weekend for the Old Ward Parade. That the concourses were like a ghost town compared to what they usually are. Great time to take 2 little kids to their first hockey game. We get there, they have a blast. It's kids' day. They're getting airbrush tattoos. They win little mini sticks at some horseshit hockey game. But my favorite part of the whole thing was my son's face when they scored first. Like when he saw the Jumbotron, he was, first of all, first thing, they start playing the national anthem, and I don't even have to say anything. Both my kids stand up straight and put the hand over their heart.
You're winning.
And I was like, I almost got misty-eyed. I was like, there it is. God, that got me. So you fast forward. The first goal goes in, and my son's eyes are just the size of dinner plates. He doesn't know what to do. And then he sees everyone else going nuts, and he starts going berserk.
How'd they do with the noise?
They got right into it.
Did they?
I thought there might be a problem because they're the kids who walk in the bathroom fans on, and they're like, it's too loud. Knock it off. Meanwhile, I'm tinnitus up. I've been shooting handguns with no ear protection for years.
Huh?
I'm Archer. Just what? Just all the time. So I take my kids. They see the fight. They're going berserk. And I'm like, yes, my kids are into a sport. They love this. And then when they get stir crazy, because they're little kids, 4 and 2, going to be 3, they're running the concourse with me. And every older security guard just loves it, right? Just loves it. And then we have a weird moment where the people behind us start yelling, "Boo, Jack! Boo, Jack sucks!" And my son looks at me and goes, and I go, "They're not talking about you, bud. It's okay. They're not mad at you.
They're talking about a different Jack."
He doesn't know that other people are named Jack.
Lauren Oubre, you're still rolling with the trash stash. Lauren, this thing has a shelf life. In fact, I think I want to consult the comments
You
tonight.
can't get rid of it.
Throughout the course of the show, how much longer do you think, based on what I look like right now? Because I'll tell you the total aside from what I'm talking about with the Sabres game, but which has a through line into our show. But I caught myself. See, I at home have a nice camera set up. I've got a multi-monitor thing at home so I can be just productive at home as I am in my office at work. I always get a downward angle on myself through my work camera. And then today I had to do a conference call from like a random office with my laptop camera, which has the upward angle. And as soon as I saw this thing through a different angle, I'm like, oh my God, not only do I have double chins, but this thing looks horrible. I'm already realizing that this mustache has a shelf life.
You have to keep it.
Hey, it doesn't look good.
It doesn't look good. I can always trust you to be
It
honest.
doesn't look good, but you have to do one show coming up in the next 5 weeks before this draft. You got to do it in dress pants and that wife beater tucked in, because the look that you give off the Italian look who is just sitting there waiting for his wife to finish the sauce.
And I'm just chain smoking cigarettes in the kitchen with a little bit of the good bread.
That's it. You should even get a tobacco pipe, maybe.
A tobacco pipe. Guys, I want to tell you a story. Doug used to be a coworker of mine back when we were young and stupid, and I walked into human resources with a straight face. Now, luckily, the human resources officer was a good friend of ours. And I sit down and I go, "I need your help. I need to file a harassment claim." And she goes, "Really? What's going on?" Because they get excited about this. Like, oh my God, we trained for this. Like, this is okay, something to do besides shuffle papers. And I go, a harassment claim. And she goes, "Okay, so can you tell me a little bit more about the situation of the party?" I go, "I'll tell you exactly what it was. I was sitting in the break room eating my lunch, and Doug Relosky walked in with his hat off. His hair is atrocious, and it's off-putting, and I can't." Now, at the time, folks, you have to understand, Doug had a coif that stood about 6 inches off his head. And we all hated him. He was, the moment he gave off this vibe of when he walked in the room, you'd look at him and go, oh. You didn't even have to know him.
I have such good hair, still to this day. And for the draft show, I'm gonna take it off, and I'll make sure it's all done up. My hair's down beneath my ears right now, and I had such good hair and the hoop earrings going on. My hair could walk into a room and sexual harass someone.
Doug goes, "My hair and the hoop earrings." I want you to hear that sentence. My hair plus hoop earrings. Man, as a man.
The tail that I had to push away with the LA Looks gel and just the curls flowing. Man, I looked better than you with that stash.
I wanted to open a case, but now seeing my mustache on full display on camera, I feel like I'm that guy now. So with that, we went to the hockey game, and it was funny having to explain to my kids why we were booing Jack Eichel. And so in that moment, we go through this whole thing, and then we get into this week in Buffalo sports, and I hear what's kind of the opening topic of tonight's show. All of a sudden, people are talking about welcoming Stefan Diggs back. How did we get to this place? I just want to put to rest all of the Stefan Diggs discourse, because I'm exhausted by it, to be honest. Didn't we just talk ourselves into the idea of being a better football team without him? And now you're all going to turn around and try to sell me on the idea that we need him back? How and why? Doug, can you try to, Chris, do you understand where the people pounding the table for a Stefan Diggs return, where are they coming from? I don't get it.
Don't know. He's not needed here.
Well, when you go through it, take your heart out of it. Think of it like a business, and then just make your list. Let's go with all of the negatives first. He's going to turn 32 during the season in November. He's just coming off of a torn ACL. It's pretty important, specifically for a receiver with his legs. And they just ate all that cap hit last year to get rid of him. Like, so that's a big negative list.
I've got even better points. I want to talk about aging players and ACL tears because I've just got some recent ones, right? Like Trent Murphy. Let's go back to recent Bills history. Trent Murphy, his first season here in Buffalo, people were like, why the hell did we... Now, he never went on to be anything great. But the idea was, why the hell is he even here? Because he was so bad his first year, coming back from an ACL tear. And he was 27, I think, at the time we signed him. Trey White tears his ACL. Rehab takes a lot longer than expected. He tore it on Thanksgiving in New Orleans. He didn't play till week 10 of the following season because he had setbacks and he just couldn't get back into form. And he was a relatively young football player at that point. Von Miller in 2023, there is absolutely no justification for him having been near the field. Given the output, he had 1 sack for all of the snaps that he played. But I think the best recent comp for the Stephon Diggs situation is Odell Beckham Jr. Mm-hmm. You take an uber talented athlete at the wide receiver position. If you look at what happened to Beckham, tears his ACL in the Super Bowl in February 2022. So despite all the speculation in 2023, Von Miller probably fueled a lot of that when he was like, no, I'm recruiting him. He wants to be in Buffalo. He would have played, like, he thought he was ready to play, but if he could pass a physical, someone would have given him some money. Mm-hmm. Didn't happen. Spent the next 2 seasons of his career, Odell Beckham Jr., Baltimore and Miami. 44 combined catches between the two teams, 0 touchdowns last year, before being unceremoniously dumped at the end of the season and finishing the season as an unrestricted free agent.
I think your number one hit on that, on all of those, are the age factors. When Frank Gore, for instance, did both of his ACLs and stuff like that in those back-to-back years in college, he was young.
Yep.
When Breece Hall, you know what I mean? Young. When you're in your 30s and you're 30 years old, 31, 32, you tear that ACL, you're not playing the next year.
And not only that,
you're
but
just
then...
not at the level that you're accustomed to.
In the comments, Roy Collins, Diggs is coming off an ACL, probably wouldn't be ready till mid-season anyway. I'm not even looking at mid-season. Look at the Odell Beckham Jr. trajectory. You tear your ACL, you're not ready, period.
Right.
You may never be ready again. And so in that way, while I understand it's a fun daydream, right? Like a star coming back to town who was maligned, but it would be fun because we need everyone goes, whoa, look at this, look at these old highlights of him in a Bills uniform. That's smoke and mirrors and a daydream from a bygone era that doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
Embrace it, enjoy that it happened, but let it go. Stephon Diggs is like the ex-girlfriend that you make a bigger thing out of in your head. And everyone listening to this, Lauren, you probably have an ex-boyfriend out there somewhere that once upon a time you conflated this relationship into something, and for years you probably carried it with you where you were like, man, that was the best of times. And in reality, it was just your average relationship that ended the way most relationships do.
I'm going to look at any option to get better anywhere on my team I can, especially for a cheap number. But that one, that's going to be a tough sell. There's too many negatives. There's too many bad factors that come into it. And the age, the ACL, and like I said, the fact that they just ate all that money, it just doesn't make sense to bring him back through that. What do you got there?
Actually, can you do me a favor? Go over there. See that purple label? Yeah. That was distilled by our friend Ryan Rhodes from Albany Distilling Company. It's Ironweed Empire Rye Whiskey. I'm going to pour myself a little bit of that. So, obviously, fans are feeling really rational these days. Mm-hmm. They're reminiscing about the Stephon Diggs era. They're trying to create narratives as to why he deserves to be here. And what I'll say is this. I have so much more respect for the way they handled that than the way that they handled these PED suspensions.
Yeah.
Let's get into it. And Chris, since everybody's being overreactionary about this, let's get this out there. The reaction announcement that Michael Hoecht and Larry Ogunjobi were each going to miss 1/3 of the 2025 season was met as I expected Bills fans to meet it.
Finding it. That's right! We can't have anyone freak out there, okay? We've got to keep our composure. We've gone too far. There's too much to lose. We've got to keep our composure.
That is how all of you sound on social media. Every single one of you. Now, Chris, you've curated some tweets. You've got some things loaded, some visuals that I sent you, bookmarked, signed, sealed, delivered. We talked about them last night. Of course you don't. Here are the facts as we know them. Both players blame tainted supplements from other people, other than their personal trainers. Both suspensions are going to void future guarantees. And we also know that beyond a shadow of a doubt, Bean has indicated that while he acknowledges that it's awkward and that it's far from ideal, they're still going to move forward with both players as part of the team.
You know what this screams for training camp and this first 6 weeks of the season? Phillips and Quentin Jefferson back in camp as a Band-Aid. That's what it screams to me.
Well, and I guess this is the question of what do you do, right?
Well, take out the suspensions, okay? Let's forget it. Forget the suspensions. Let's say they did these signings and they were still both going to play. Another high-end D lineman in the draft is on the table. So that's still on the table. That's not changing. And there's a bunch of guys out there still that are familiar with this system that we can do this for and we can go get. And we still have Carter, Oliver, the other big guy who came back. Not Jones. The other one who's still under contract. The D tackle.
Talking about Eli Anku?
No, he's going to be the one that they got rid of and got back and got rid of and got back. No, there's one more. A veteran. He's he's going to be 33 years old. They signed him a 2-year deal.
Talking about DaQuan Jones?
Yeah.
Okay.
So they still have DaQuan Jones. They still have those three guys. So if you add another veteran to that, cheap veteran, if you add a high-end draft pick to that, it's not a waste. And then you're just going to have depth after depth after depth. And it's okay. This isn't a dagger. You know what I mean, to them. It sucks. It does. And even Bean said, how do you say his name? Is it Hoax?
You know what's funny? We were just talking about hockey. He took Jochen Hesch's number.
So
from
it's
the
Yo-Yo.
Sabres,
It's Jochen Hesch.
But it's Hoyt.
It's Hoyt. So I think,
Hoyt.
I believe Bean said,
Hang on, there's not enough.
So he knew about him, but then the Pittsburgh D tackle he had no idea about. Right? Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a kick in the nads, man. It sucks, but it's not end all be all.
Kyle the beer guy. I've literally had nothing but crazy women, so I can't relate with people wanting Diggs back because we know what he was, but you're nuts to let them back in. Ain't that the truth?
I just got Drew looks like a dirty 70s gigolo with a stash.
Listen, there was nobody paying for that. There was nobody paying for that. So I'm just going to look, I think we're all in agreement here, just looking at the comments, that Stephon Diggs is, if you're a rational person, has no place here. But then rational people were not the ones talking about this situation. Like, if you look at some of the tweets, I mean, Chris, if you can throw this one on the screen for the people, let's talk about the guy who decided to double down, right? Says, first of all, he says his name is George Leahy, which I immediately saw him drunk. I picture George Leahy,
Trailer Park Boys.
Trailer Park Boys, drunk George Leahy. He said that both of the players, Hoyt and Ogunjobi, are garbage people for not disclosing. They're shady and untrustworthy. I'd cut them. First of all, sir, do you know how a contract works?
Right.
I don't think you understand. They signed the deal. If the Bills cut them, they're on the hook for whatever that looks like. Chris, I see you over there starting to get some of these things ready. Which one do you want to go with next? The embarrassment and cheaters one, or?
I'm working on them now.
All right. Can you give me the one from Alex Cullen, if you have that one? Can you throw that on the screen for people?
I don't have that.
It's in there in your emails.
I have.
What do you got for me?
Oh,
Hit me.
I gotta find it. I gotta search.
Guys, we're doing on the fly production.
My inbox is full of job shit, so it gets lost in the weeds.
Yep. So as we're sitting here talking about people having, like, here's Lauren Oubre. I'm pissed about the process that this information. Can we talk about that piece of this entire thing where it didn't get released to the team and even to the players until they were in the process of negotiating their contract?
She's right. It should start. This information should come out right before legal tampering happens. It should. The league should do that. She's 1,000%
Isn't
right.
it up to the players to disclose it? Because they're free
They're
agents.
the ones who know.
They're the only ones that know.
There's no team to have it reported to. Like, this is what I mean. Like,
Then you should be able to get out of those contracts.
and for people who are frustrated, like, what would you say you do here, Chris? This is my thing. I look at, you're a multi-billion-dollar league. You're one of the richest sports leagues in the entire world. And yet somehow you find ways to not maximize that wealth and the resources at your regular disposal to your advantage. You know, you talk about the sideline camera thing. Do you know about this? Mm-hmm. Like,
Yeah,
in
you were telling
stadiums,
me.
you can't use the side, not like to challenge something. Refs can't use the sideline camera. Why? Well, because not everyone has one. Make everyone get one.
Right.
When they go, oh, well, it's an independent organization that does the steroid testing. Okay. But change the rules about who is and who isn't allowed to get that. And they go, well, it's HIPAA. So technically the player and their agent are the only ones that find out about it. And then there's a reporting process about what goes. And it's like, oh, my God, what are we doing here?
Oh, yeah, the Harley King.
Harley King?
Yeah.
Let's see here. Which one's that?
We all know mistakes happen, but two players, I don't think I've ever heard of a situation like this. Brandon Beans, free agency this year as a complete epic failure. He lost. He forgot English in the last sentence.
Yeah.
Complete epic failure on two role players.
This is what I'm talking about. You want to talk about reasonable people. Everyone hits Twitter and turns into the WGR Weiner line. It's amazing to me that, and I know that this is not, again, Twitter's like most things, right? It's a crystallization of the loudest and most obnoxious opinions. It's not the way everyone feels. But the funny thing is, 5 people somehow read that butchered statement from that guy and decided, you know what? I'll like that. So not only does this mutant exist, but there's 5 other people out there who think exactly like him. This is a complete and epic failure that we landed a pass rush specialist, more in his prime than Von Miller was, a better fit for our archetype of pass rusher, and who could fit the minimal snap, 20, 25% of each game pass rusher role that Von Miller did and provide better juice. I don't understand.
These are the same people week 7 when one of them comes back and gets a forced fumble, a sack on a big third down, something like that. Bean's a genius. He's the best. Like,
Yeah.
just take a breath for a minute.
Can you give
and
me
see what the roles are?
What
Just
else do you have
relax.
over there, Chris?
Well, I was just going to say, what about, it's 6 games. What if we have the Falcons, both Jet games, a Patriot game, and Carolina in our first 6?
Right.
Are they going to be missed then?
And so SoCal Bills fan says it right here. Integrity matters. The player could have said something prior to the Bills signing, and maybe they did. They absolutely did. And that's why they're still here. Brandon Bean even admitted as much in the awkward, weird press conference where he had to come out and be like, hey, guys, so some weird news. Don't shoot the messenger. 2 of the 3 guys I just signed to fix our D-line. I know that was kind of a hot thing for you fans. You're not going to see them for a while because they're suspended for PEDs. They said, we knew about the Hoecht suspension.
All right.
They admitted. And then they said Ogunjobi found out the night before he was supposed to sign. They knew about it and decided to tweak his contract a little bit and move forward anyway. Now, Chris, do you have the Daniel Abate masterpiece? Embarrassment? I think I think his tweet speaks to what SoCal Bills fan in the comments is talking about. I'll read it for you. It says, this is an embarrassment knowing that they're cheaters and still signed them. Ogunjobi got $8 million for 11 games. Are you kidding me? Some culture. And who's to say they'll be any good without their drugs? He spelled there wrong. What did we Bills fans do to deserve this? I keep saying our GM and head coach are overrated. Both should be fired. They both knew and still signed dopers. Bills are starting to become a laughing stock yet again. But I'm just a fan. What do I know?
Correct. Nothing, sir.
You know nothing.
You know nothing. You are Fez. I said good day. I said good day.
I know nothing.
Like, that's just ridiculous.
It's to have that hyper, but like, this is what I mean. Obviously, there's human beings out here having a really good time about this. Everyone's taking it really well. This guy was replying to Joe Marino, of all people, who is such a good person. Like, if I was in Joe Marino's shoes, I would have eviscerated this moron, but I didn't. And I didn't comment on it because I'm trying to be nice. Now, Chris,
I got the main one.
Can you give me the Alex Cullen one? The free agency period and the, what is it, the major stain?
I got to see if I have that.
Abject disaster. Guys, here's one from somebody named Alex Cullen.
I got that. Here we go.
Yeah, throw that up there on the screen for the people, guys. A guy named Alex Cullen who goes by @Buffalo Commander. And here's the worst part. 46 people agreed with this opinion that you're seeing on your screen right now. This free agent period for Buffalo is turned into an abject disaster. Benford looks like he won't be signed. We get Palmer Bosa, major injury concerns, in parentheses. We don't find one single freaking 1D tech D tackle. Huge issues at cornerback still. No speed at wide receiver, and 2 of our top 4 quote-unquote gets will miss the first 6 games. And then he followed it up by saying, not only this, but we're now trapped into drafting a D tackle and cornerback early. That's what this the entire draft is skewed towards those positions. What are you crying about? They were going to do that anyway.
That's what this is for.
Also, if this signing period for the Buffalo Bills was an abject disaster, what did the Browns just do? Kenny, you traded for Kenny Pickett. You gave away an asset in this year's draft for Kenny Pickett.
2 gloves. Kenny, 2 gloves.
Our offseason is an abject disaster, though. You got rope-a-doped into paying a defensive end who never wanted to leave $40 million a year, and your team is going to be terrible because of it.
See how
our season is an abject disaster, though.
But these people just, I don't understand their thought process. Like, how are 2 role players an absolute disaster? Like, I just don't understand. And what happens if Bosa goes back to the 11% or 12% or 13% pass rush? Well, you know what I mean? Percentage that happens for us.
Here's my favorite, and I feel here's what I love. Roy Collins in the comments. Twitter wasn't designed for thinkers. No, it was not. But Chris, to your point, you do have the crown jewel here, and it sucks because I don't mind this guy, Kevin Syracuse. Over there at the Built-in Buffalo Network, he's talking about the. He actually does a podcast with Kevin Massari. Chris, you throw that up there for him? Okay. Kevin Syracuse says he loves Brandon Beane and how he's made us his perennial Super Bowl contender. But this is a big stain for him and the organization. A stain. You just can't give $16 million to guys who are suspended for 12 games combined. Not to mention the whole defense still needs to be fixed. Just when you thought that the D-line was improving and the cornerback was the main position that needs to be addressed, bam! Every position still on the table with no money left in free agency. And then obviously the draft, which they have to knock out of the park.
The whole defense needs to be fixed, and you just went to the AFC championship game. Like, again, man, you need to really think of the words that you're using, and when you're trying to let off some steam, you do not sound smart.
Chris, we all need to get together. Say it with me. Goose Fraba. Guys, I want to give you a thought. Just one salient thought from an idiot drinking whiskey who has a little bit of Google at his disposal. November 6th of last season, the Buffalo Bills signed a pair of defensive linemen. Signed them to the active roster off the street. Jordan Phillips and Quentin Jefferson. Now, you can tell me that, yes, it makes a difference because they had experience in the system. Sure, a Leslie Frazier and Sean McDermott system. Not a Bobby Babich called defense. Bobby Babich has no familiarity with these guys. He doesn't know them. He just understands what he's heard and what he's seen on tape. And I guess he did know them adjacently because he was coaching the linebackers.
Right.
But he wasn't the D coordinator. He certainly wasn't making the game plans as far as how he builds his defensive lines. They stepped in, right? Like, they stepped in on the 6th. Now, I want you to keep that in mind. It was November 6th when they signed those two. Hoecht and Ogunjobi are going to be back in week 7 after spending all of camp in the preseason with the team. Under the suspension rules, they will not be allowed into the building from weeks 1 through 3. But the NFL rules also, and I guess the average fan probably doesn't take this into account. When you get suspended in the NFL, if it's a 4-game, 6-game, 8-game, doesn't matter, you serve the first half of it out of the building. No communication, you can't come in for food, you can't say hi to the boys. You're out. But the back half of your suspension, you can't play in the games, but you're in the building. You're attending meetings. You're practicing and you're going through walkthroughs.
Yep.
You just can't play. So with that said, I mean, because the idea is they want you to be able to get these players back and hit the ground running. So with that, the Bills signed Quentin Jefferson and Jordan Phillips last year on November 6th, and Phillips played 30% of the defensive tackle snaps 4 days later on November 10th against the Colts, and then 29% the following week against Kansas City.
We won both.
He was clearly an upgrade from Austin Johnson. And Casey Tuhill, like what? Everything that they brought to the table on the defensive line was better than the guys that they stepped in and replaced, who had been there all offseason, had played in games, had the seasoning and the time on task. So you mean to tell me that players who you handpicked because you think they fit your scheme and you like what they do and you have a plan for them, somehow that's all going to get derailed because they missed 3 weeks with the team? This is all overblown by fans who don't understand the NFL and the actual behind-the-scenes machinations. And that's where I feel like it's like, guys, I'm not a savant. I'm not an insider. I'm not some genius. Clearly, I mean, look at my facial hair.
And
if I was intelligent,
and you're drinking Utica Club.
And I'm drinking Utica Club. I'm no genius. I'm just an idiot who drinks too much, has poor taste in facial hair, good taste in women, and I have Google. And I do a little bit of research. I ask questions before I take to Twitter to scream about things. Unless I'm shirtless after a Bills loss.
Yeah, unless it's Sunday at 1.
Unless it's Sunday at 1 o'clock.
I mean, again, you're right, and we all get emotional. But before you go to it and say people should be fired and everything like that, you just said Goose Fraba. Like I said, I've seen you wish AIDS upon Brian Daboll. I have.
Hey.
I've seen you do it. But
hey, they can cure that now. Look at Magic Johnson.
Then you've taken a breath and thought about what you said. You know what I mean? Just relax. It's not end all be all. Now, if you go out and sign a $150 million wide receiver and a $300 million quarterback, and the next day they're suspended for 6 games, yes, that is an issue. You just invested a crap ton of money. But for 2 role players, no. It is not that big of an issue.
Did you go to like DraftKings and check the lines for Buffalo's win total before PED suspensions and after? Did they shift? Did those 2 players make that much of a shift in wins?
I'm sure they
for
didn't.
The Bills.
I guarantee you no one noticed.
Right. Because like you said, Chris, you brought up a great point. What happens if the gauntlet of their season isn't until week 8?
Yeah, like it was last year.
Right. I'm just what happens if that happens again?
And so that's the one thing I will throw into this conversation. It's now going to be highly interesting to see how the schedule falls. Because if your first 7 games are kind of like our last season was, where it's loaded at the front with, hey, here's a murderer's row of games where you know you're not walking out of here without... Like, you have to be on your A game every week to not lose one of those opening 6 if you're the Bills. And you came out, 4-2?
Yeah.
And then just hit the ground running after that and train wrecked everybody on your way to another AFC East title. This is a veteran roster full of veteran players, a lot of whom just got a healthy payday.
Yep.
Because the core of the team is still intact. You still have all the ancillary talent around that. This is 2 guys who were bit players who are supposed to give you a little extra seasoning, not be the foundational part of your defense. These moves don't set them back as much as anybody else does, because think about how many games that we played without Terrell Bernard, without Teron Johnson. We lost Christian Benford for games. We lost players 4 games last year and still came out on top of our division and damn near on top of the conference.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, for a team, it's not how you start, it's how you finish.
Yeah.
And so for a team that seems to understand that and plays its best football later in the year, that might be the best time to get these more veteran players back. I made the joke. I had one tweet about the whole thing, and it was just that I wish it was Joey Bosa who had gotten popped for PEDs. Put that dude on the shelf in bubble wrap for 7 weeks.
Yeah.
Tell me that he can't get put on IR before week 8. I would call this a home run off season.
Yeah, that's what I mean. They still got their core. They still got the veteran guys. They brought back a lot of the starters that are coming back. And for people to say it completely needs to be fixed, are you insane? You got 1 game away from the Super Bowl again. It doesn't need to be completely fixed. It needs to be tweaked. That's what it needs to do. So people just need to calm down. It is going to be okay.
I like Super Mexican in the comments that says I do look like Smiley. He goes, you do look like Smiley from Training Day.
Yeah.
Say it, cabron. When they're in the kitchen and he drops off Ethan Hawke.
I don't even want to. And he's like, he's telling the truth.
He's telling the truth, I say. And he goes,
man.
He goes, that's some trippy shit, man.
And he goes, it's just business. You know that, right?
And he just gives him a pat on the back and
You
throws
just had a shotgun in my face with the bathtub running. What do you mean? It's not personal.
I caught my reflection and I was like, oh no, I'm bushy eyebrows away from being Smiley from Training Day. No, just looking through the comments here though. I think there's a lot, I'm happy to see that you guys who tune into this are all, at least we're all on the same wavelength here. Mayor McCheese though, he goes, is this the criminal lawyer friend or just the criminal friend? I get them mixed up.
That's fair. Totally. That's totally fair. I just have never been caught.
I've never been caught. Doug, don't act like you could outrun the cops.
No. I'm like this. Did you do that? No.
No. Why would
What are you talking? What?
No.
No. As soon as they leave. Whoa.
Yeah, Doug's
Close.
40 time is 15 minutes.
Yeah, I have a friend who's listening to the show right now who runs a 4.3. 4.3.
I like Ralph Wilson Sr. Those tweets sound like Drew looked when Chris told him Chenault was signed. That was a perfect moment to catch on tape.
You know
Yeah,
what,
I know.
dude? When he returns one for a touchdown this year, we're gonna celebrate.
He's going to return one, all right. What he's going to be returning is his jersey back to the person who handed it to him when they cut him at the end of training camp. That's the only thing he's going to be returning.
I love it.
Now, the last order of business before we close up shop for the night is the Matt Milano contract restructure and how I think it underscores the way that the Bills scouting department's grown and just the way that team development has really this move might not be popular. And I think that staying ahead of the market was a theme of the offseason for the Buffalo Bills this year. Mm-hmm. You watched Brandon Beane get ahead of a lot. He signed a lot of players to a lot of money that by the end of this season will look small by comparison. Terrell Bernard, his payday is huge compared to other linebackers, but fast forward a year, he will be right about top of the middle of the pack. Mm-hmm. Khalil Shakir's contract is a steal,
dude,
for the value that he provides in this specific offense. It's just become a part of Beane's approach. But unfortunately, that doesn't just mean re-signing your own and staying out of the market. It also means moving away from contracts early and not continuing to throw good money after bad, even when it comes to fan favorites and guys who are seen as the core of the roster.
Edmonds.
So the news comes out that Matt Milano has signed a contract restructure yesterday, and that it changed his guaranteed money and freed up some cap now. We're still going to need a cap hit of $11 million next year, but it does give him free agency after this season. Mm-hmm. Now, I've got a lot of thoughts on that, but I want to start out by saying that first of all, it underscores his play and performance and his durability was no longer worth the price tag. That's the only reason you make this move. Also, Milano has been a staple of this team ever since the day that Sean McDermott finally benched Ramon Humber and allowed him to kind of flourish back in 2017. I saw it with my own two eyes when I had credentials for training camp back in 2017, and I can tell you I will never forgive Sean McDermott or Ramon Humber for standing in Matt Milano's way.
Ramon Humber.
Not ever. Ramon Humber, I'll curse his name every time I hear it until I'm dead. Which, I don't know. I think if I keep this mustache and wear my beard around in public, it might only be a couple weeks.
Dude, you should be the first guy that drowned in the cartel's pool when Gus Fring poisoned everybody.
Oh, yeah, Breaking Bad. I mean, I don't understand the thought process behind it. I know we keep going back to it like every 27 minutes, but I don't know what the hell you were thinking.
I'll tell you what I was thinking. I don't have anything that I care about. I'm dead inside, so there's no midlife crisis coming.
You look like you eat warm Caesar salads for lunch. In a Tupperware container. I like in the Tupperware container is
not
like
a good one, a stained up one.
Yeah,
it's got spaghetti stains in it.
Gross. And your croutons are soggy.
When he's in the break room at work, he takes his dress shirt off so he doesn't get ranch on it.
Oh, no, yeah. He has a couple of splashes of Caesar, and anyone who's talking with him in a meeting or anything throughout the day gets the hint, just gets that hint of the Caesar dressing that's in it.
So, first of all, a couple things in the comments that we have to address. First of all, Mike Partham, put it on the board, Chris. If Laviska Shenault has a kick return for a touchdown at any point in the year, I have to drink a Seagram's every show for the rest of the year.
Deal.
Put it on the board.
Yes.
I will take that because it won't happen. And Mike, when it doesn't at the end of the season, you owe me one. We're in now. I like this, guys. I see. This is the energy I love from you guys. That's why live shows trump doing this alone in a room with this idiot.
You know when you know when it's going to happen? It's going to happen in a game when we're winning like 42-10.
And it doesn't matter.
And they just kick the field goal. And he's like, you know what? I'm just going to return it because there's 4.5 minutes left. And he goes.
And the other team just doesn't care.
Right. And at that point, you might be either A, cooking for your kids because it was an away game, or we're up by 40 points and you're like, you know what? I'm going to hit the parking lot 2 minutes early.
So, and before we move forward with this conversation, Mayor McCheese, and I love this because Mayor McCheese, Chris, might have been one of our oldest follows.
Yeah, I think he's first.
One of our first real follows, and just like people that we would talk to about podcasting and just the stuff, and he would comment on our show. Here's what I'll say. He's got two comments here. How the fuck did we convince Milano to take a pay cut? That's insane. And always crazy that Milano was the second linebacker we took in that draft. Tanner Vallejo got drafted ahead of him. Mm-hmm. And this speaks to what I'm about to talk about and why I'm encouraged by, even though I don't want to see Milano leave, I understand the age. I understand everything, right? Like, you look at what a staple of the team Milano's been. But you also look at the fact that they lucked into him because they didn't take him with the first linebacker pick they took.
Nope.
They took Tanner Vallejo ahead of Matt Milano. They were throwing darts in 2017 when Doug Whaley's crew found him. And then they fired Doug Whaley and moved all those guys out, and they brought in Brandon Beane. Now, they didn't, like, Brandon Beane's first real draft was 2018. And that's where I think this is interesting, because if you look at how linebacker went, right? Like, you draft Milano with a 5th round pick in 2017, but it's a whole different regime. Mm-hmm. New regime comes in and decides, you know what I need? I need a big, hulking, behemoth, physical freak linebacker. So you trade up in the 1st round to get Tremaine Edmonds.
Was he 19? I believe he was 19 years old.
And so you go, hey, this kid's young. He's got longevity. We've never seen a physical specimen like this, and we think we can make him an off-ball linebacker in our system. Mm-hmm. Absurdly different skill set from the starter Matt Milano you just discovered halfway through the 2017 season. So now you've got both these guys running next to each other, and you're watching them go back and forth, and while Tremaine Edmonds is good at pressuring the A-gap and he can make some splash plays here and there, Milano is far and away your more electric linebacker. Mm-hmm. And so you watch the development of how they scout and how they decide to address the linebacker position. So you go along, it's soon, like, because I'm thinking about this, Sean McDermott came from programs where when they were at their best and winning games, they had really great linebacker play.
Thomas Davis, Luke Kuechly.
Shaq Thompson.
Yep.
Carolina was rich at linebacker, and that's when he had his most success as a defensive coordinator.
Mm-hmm. And think of all the linebackers, Trotter, stuff like that when he was in Philly with Reed.
So when the time came for them to pick one, they picked Milano over Edmonds, the physical freak who was, and then you look at their paydays. Edmonds got this monster $100 million contract. I think Milano's contract was like $45 million. Mm-hmm. It wasn't anything, but he's a weak side linebacker.
Thought it was 4 for 40.
4 for 40, 41. So you pay the guy who's making the plays, not the guy who has the pedigree and the one who you say, well, he was a first round pick and he's this physical specimen, what have you. They had backfilled that with a guy that they unceremoniously drafted in the 3rd round in Terrell Bernard, someone who we mocked the pick of. We just were like, oh my God, this is a terrible idea. I can't believe they're doing this.
Please tell me you remember what I said.
Yes.
4 years, 44. Was
4 years, 44.
Original deal.
I looked right at you when we took him because we were at the baby shower for Davini, and I looked right at you and I saw you were upset. And you know I do college football and the draft stuff. You're like, tell me something good. I go, all this guy does is stop passes. He intercepts the ball, and he does not let the ball get completed when he is covering someone. And that's what the league is turning into.
And so what they did was they understood with Milano what they wanted their archetype at linebacker to become. And then you started watching who they brought in for visits and the linebackers that they were talking to at the combine. And you realize they did this 1 year thing of like, hey, we have to go get a Tremaine Edmonds. And then watching where the league was going and watching the success of Matt Milano, they turned that into their scouting rubric and said, hey, wait a minute. Let's see if we can find more of these traits. What does Matt do well? Well, let's see if we can identify a handful of these traits in some of these other prospects and start filling the linebacker room with those types of talents. And you start building that out. I like this because you know where they haven't been able to do that is the wide receiver room. Mm-hmm. Like, you want to talk about a team that still needs to refine its scouting process? The fact that they're now able to move on from a 31-year-old Matt Milano, you look at the struggles they've had at wide receiver. They drafted Ray McLeod in 2018 and Austin Proell in the 6th and 7th round. Both sub 6 foot wide receivers, lacked physicality, had speed and agility, but lacked explosiveness. Now keep that in mind because you're gonna see a trend. The very next year, actually, they didn't draft a wide receiver in 2019. 2020, they take Gabe Davis in the 4th round. Big physical boundary wide receiver, giant catch radius, contested catch ability. He's got this average route running, right? Average route runner, nothing special, which is why he's in the 4th round. Limited route tree because of how he was used in college and the fact that he didn't really have that much exposure to it. And subpar explosion off the line of scrimmage, which meant inconsistent separation. Also, hands issues.
Yep.
Hands. They also drafted in the same year Isaiah Hodgins. Tall, long, below average speed, but he had contested jump ball ability, right? They take 2 of these guys in the same draft. Varying degrees of success. Both of them left Buffalo without a second contract. But it was better than 2018, right? Mm-hmm. It was a step in the right direction.
Right.
You know what? 2021. Brandon Beane goes right back to the well of, okay, well, I went big. I went small. Didn't work. I went big. That didn't work. 2021, he goes right back to Marquez Stevenson. Sub 6 foot, lacking physicality, but has a lot of speed, durability issues.
Didn't work.
Didn't work. He did the same thing that he just did 3 years ago. Failed. Mm-hmm. Drafting wide receivers. Then he goes to 2022, hits on Khalil Shakir, a small, fast, but stout, solidly built. Great hands, crazy catchability, but contested catchability for a wide receiver who's too small to generally have that.
Right. Now, the size was a knock on him, but what was up there for him? But what was up there for him? His route running ability. He wasn't a 1 or 2 trick pony. He could run the routes.
Yep.
And I think that is the key when you go through this. It was like a perfect example of this is the wide receiver from the Chargers out of TCU. This was his 2nd year this year.
Now, but here's what I'll say. You hit on a Khalil Shakir and everyone goes, okay, so the pivoting between small and big wide receiver finally paid off. Do you know what he did the very next year? Justin Shorter. Tall, big boundary wide receiver, contested catchability. lack of a route tree, average release. It's like Brandon Beane has only been able to develop 2 pitches. It's like if you're a pitcher in baseball. Now, Chris, that's a sport you understand. Doug, it's a sport you love. If all I have is a 4-seam and a curveball, that's all Brandon Beane has when it comes to wide receivers, and he just keeps throwing them both, hoping one of them hits. At linebacker, they tried 2 different approaches. One of them was a home run. Mm-hmm. One of them was
It was average.
And they found a way to switch their entire scouting philosophy to where you're now able, right, to go back and say, I got a Milano. And then I use what I learned about scouting a Milano in my system as a pro, and I can take that into college scouting and say, you know what? Terrell Bernard has some of these same traits. Can I go get a guy who, even though he's undersized, can play middle linebacker with these traits? And then he goes and does it. And then you get excited because you go, okay, we already have a stacked linebacker group, but I'm going to go out and again draft in the 3rd round a Dorian Williams. And at the time I was like, what are we doing? Why are you bringing in another guy at weak side linebacker who can't play? And then I go, wait a minute. Isn't that exactly what I said about Terrell Bernard? They have a plan for these guys. And then you watch when he tears his bicep. Matt Milano disappears for the most of the 2024 season. And Dorian Williams fills in pretty admirably.
He did pretty good.
And then the coaching staff recognizes his weakness in coverage and says, hey, we built out the roster enough that guess what? We're going to be fine because we now have a Cam Lewis we trust, so we can play dime. And now that we're going to play dime, it doesn't matter that our weak side linebacker isn't the best pass coverage guy on the field,
right? Because
we have a scheme that we can rely on to try to take some of what the opposing team wants to do away.
He's a downhill wrecking ball. That's what he is.
They've worked this. And so now what you're opening up for is the ability for the Bills to make a move like this with Milano. Because if we don't have Dorian Williams, if you weren't able to go into the draft and identify back-to-back years of Terrell Bernard and a Dorian Williams at the linebacker position, you don't have the flexibility to make this mandate to Milano. You have to resolve your contract because we can't pay you this going forward.
It's going to be interesting to see what happens in about a month here with the draft. If some guys fall to them. I don't even
think guys fall to them. I think that there's a world where the Buffalo Bills are absolutely drafting another 4th, 5th, 6th round linebacker they say, hey.
What do you make of Ulufosio?
He's true. Well, and this is it. They go, look, we brought in Ulufosio. He could potentially already be that guy.
Now, listen. So out of Washington, again, his specialty
was pass coverage.
Yes. Yep. His specialty is pass coverage. I know we didn't get to see a lot of him last year. I know he was just practicing. Like, I understand that. But when they went on that run and lost to Michigan.
Vita Vega, Brandon Beane should thank Doug Whaley for the Matt Milano template. He's completely right.
Yeah.
I think that, Dolak from UB, if you want a guy who late in the draft, but maybe a little earlier than some people might like, you think you can turn to and say, you know what? With one of these multiple 5th round picks I have, sure, I'll take a flyer on Shane Dolak. You want to know why? Because he's way faster than people thought he was going to be. His 40 time was crazy.
So 2 things. I know you can script those things, but did you see his pro day at UB?
Yes.
Whoa.
Out of control.
Like, dude, it was nuts.
The things that he thought he would fail, that people knocked him for, he knocked out of the park. So now it's the question of who do they find to backfill this and continue growing an organic linebacker core. Like, there's a reason Nick Morrow got signed after being an NFL veteran for as long as he has been and couldn't get on the field no matter who was hurt.
Until Jihad Campbell falls into their lap at 30.
And Sean McDermott looks at the name and goes, I can't help myself.
No, I know.
All right, that's a joke, people. We make jokes here. But realistically, I think the question has to be asked as we close out the show. What's in it for Milano? Why does Milano agree to this? If you think about the philosophy, not just the move and the fact that the Bills have proven that they can scout this now, which gives them the flexibility to go to Milano and say, look, we're going to replace you. We've been doing it. Stay here for a championship run one more time.
That's what it is. He knows the system, and he has Josh Allen as his quarterback.
But what's his incentive? Is it just, hey, before I'm too old to play anymore, I get to pick, for the first time, I get to pick another team? Or is the fact that it's a 1-year contract? I just go back to earlier in the show, we talked about Stephon Diggs. We traded Stephon Diggs to the Houston Texans, and one of the first things that they did was renegotiate his contract down to a 1-year deal, allowing him to become a free agent immediately after the season. At what point do the Bills not preemptively negotiate that sort of arrangement to make his contract more flexible as part of a trade?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we all want to say that, like, hey, the reason Matt Milano agrees to this is because it gives him the ability to taste free agency and pick his final team before he probably retires from the NFL. And that's great. But also, it gives the Bills the flexibility to go out there to market and say, hey, if I'm being a shrewd GM, I tell the player, this is for you. This is to give you all the stuff you want, Matt. And on the back end, I go, now that he's on a 1-year deal, that there's an out. I trade his rights to a team that has something I want, who needs a good defender and can't pay a guy that they have. It's lowered his cap hit now that he's renegotiated his contract. And oh, by the way, you can then decide both as player and team whether you want to keep that relationship going.
Yep. And if you don't, you still have Dorian Williams.
It's almost like the NHL deadline, where it's like, we now could shop Matt Milano as a rental player to some other team as part of a larger trade. I think it would be shrewd, and I don't know that Brandon Beane's that cold. Like, I don't know if he has it in him.
At the end of the day, it's a business, and if it's going to keep his job security, you know what I mean, intact, he's going to do it.
I like this. Lauren Oubre, he can go be a male model, and she just flashes the cash. Lauren, I could see you being a proponent of, like, the Thunder from Down Under with guest starring Matt Milano.
As long as he doesn't have a stash like yours.
They wouldn't let him in the door of the establishment.
True that.
So, Mayor McCheese, just killing it in the comments tonight. Guys, this is what I love about our live shows. Our listeners who care and who know us and get the vibe of the show show up. We all have a good time. We drink together. We have a blast. For those of you only listening to audio, what are you doing? What are you watching? Murder, She Wrote at home with your wives?
Angela Lansbury, man.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah, brother.
Don't give me a hell yeah. She's no gold. Listen, Angela Lansbury's hot, but she's no Golden Girls.
In the heat of the night.
Listen, who's your
Silk
favorite?
stockings.
Who's your favorite Golden Girl?
B. Arthur.
Yeah, everyone knows that.
Come on, man. That ain't even close. I have B. Arthur on my fridge at home in a Bills sweater drinking wine.
I've seen it. Guys, I just want you to stay open-minded, because if Brandon Beane is as shrewd as I think he needs to be, you could make a move here with Matt Milano. I don't know, like a team who maybe is shopping a D-end and needs to make improvements elsewhere on the roster and needs players. And I don't know.
I like it.
Maybe they just paid a bunch of wide receivers and now they know they can't afford upgrades anywhere else. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here. I'm just throwing ideas on the table.
Get on the phone, Mr. Hendricks.
What do I know? I'm just a guy with alcohol and Google. Guys, I love you. I love that you show up for this every week, but for tonight, we got to get the hell out of here. I'm Drew Gear. That's Chris Kruger. SoCal Bills fan, your fridge is set. And yes, Terry White, the Sabres did win that game. And you know why they won? Because the Vegas Knights were so hell-bent on letting Jack Eichel embarrass the Sabres that they passed the puck. The guy had an open net.
There's an empty net goal, and they wanted to give it to Eichel.
They wanted to give it to Eichel, passed it to him, but he wasn't paying attention. 5 seconds later, it's in the back of the net to force overtime, and we win it. That's the loudest I've heard that place. My kids got to see that. It was epic. It was a Buffalo moment for them. Chris, that's gonna forge them in the flames of Buffalo sports fandom forever. At least I'm hoping. Guys, thanks for showing up. But for tonight, we got to get the hell out of here. I'm Drew Gear. That's Chris Kruger. This is my buddy Doug Relosky. And this has been your Rock Pile Report.